Due to the COVID pandemic, we didn't have an International Boxing Hall of Fame inductee service for 2020 or 2021. That created this big backlog for 2022. Miguel Cotto, Vladimir Klitschko, Juan Manuel Marquez, Andre Ward, Bernard Hopkins, Roy Jones Jr., Floyd, Money, Mayweather all go in at the same time. Floyd, understandably, was emotional when he took to the stand. I'm sure moments like that, maybe thinking, is this your last real big award? It probably brings back a lot of emotions, a lot of pain, childhood trauma of being moulded into this success by your overbearing father. The loss, of course, still kind of recent, of Uncle Roger, such a key part of Floyd's success. But there were certain things he said, inevitably, the rhetoric, the recycled phrases, where you have to go, if you were part of that era, just, nah, Floyd. That's not how it went down. When you were technically the B-side, to use your own language, you are trying to reframe history here, and we've got to put things straight. In particular, the remark about how he put the heavyweights out of business. Now look, for a start, because Vladimir Klitschko was so boring, it's got to be said, during his reign, he kind of put himself out of business. Was it Sultan Ibragimov he fought in Madison Square Garden sometime in like 08, 09? And I think it was so poor, they never wanted to have him back again. It was so tentative, boring, slapping away, a little jab and never following through. Klitschko killed the heavyweight division on his own. But secondly, more importantly, this idea of a takeover, it just wasn't true with Money May. As talented as he was in his prime, as good as he was at 130, 140, Floyd came about through this very meticulous route. Look, when Roy Jones Jr. was still just about at his best in his early 30s, he was still pound for pound number one ahead of Floyd. And believe it or not, Hopkins, after he beat De La Hoya, he was rated above Floyd around the mid-noughties, 05, before he got beat by Jermaine Taylor. So when Floyd really came into the public conscience as a pound for pound number one, and we all agreed, a lot of it had to do with the previous kings having been beaten. It wasn't just a pure takeover. He didn't prove himself the best in absolute terms. It was about former kings having lost. Roy Jones Jr., of course, completely fell off a cliff when he came back down from heavyweight. And the heavyweight division being boring. Floyd was more than aware that he needed either the right kind of dance partner or some sort of angle to brand himself in the public conscience. Bit by bit, he tried different things. He tried playing up to the Mexican audience wearing a sombrero. You saw him awkwardly dress himself as a gladiator for Carlos Baldomir. Bad decision, didn't suit his personality. But here's a guy just trying to find that angle because his talent alone wasn't enough. For big boxing fans like us, we could watch Floyd dismantle Gatti or Corrales and just sit back and go, you know what? That was a superb demonstration of pugilistic skill. But that's not enough for everybody. And when there was a direct comparison between Floyd and Roy Jones, back when they were world champions in the late 90s and early noughties, there was no confusion over who was the more exciting of the two. Floyd goes forward, he benefits from those big guys losing. Heavyweight division is an absolute graveyard. Keeps going, tries different things, finally gets the shot against De La Hoya, and completely leans into the role of villain. And so when Floyd gets the decision over De La Hoya, narrowly, he is insistent on emphasizing this whole A-side, B-side dynamic. He's now in pole position, and he's going to financially punish you for being his sequential dance partner. And the way he plays the undefeated record, business-wise, is very clever. It's like he's preying on ignorance which actually happens all the time on YouTube and on boxing channels, stupid JPEGs, you name it. Floyd preys on the ignorance. He goes, look, I'm the last of the undefeated guys from the noughties and 90s. Aren't you curious of when I could possibly lose? So everybody tunes in for the next fight. And the other side of the idiots are going, hang on, still undefeated. He's probably the best fighter ever. There can be no doubt that Floyd is both Hall of Fame worthy and an all-time great. At 130 pounds super featherweight, he was so damn good, so efficient, just so hard to fight. He might just about beat everyone at that poundage. As good as the likes of Alexis Arguello was, is he going to find that great straight right hand against Floyd? Or is he just going to get picked off? I'm probably going to have to go for the latter, as much as I like Arguello. But the things Floyd says, the way he overly beats his chest, it's still almost to try and compensate for the fact he didn't have that pure connection with the crowd, and has continued to push back against this criticism with these overblown statements about how good he thinks he is and his place in history. Now, had Floyd become a world champion back in the early 90s, back when the heavyweight division was really warming up, and there was no chance of any, in quotation marks, takeover, putting people out of business. Back when people fought more often, when I thought there was more genuine talent in the weight classes he competed at, he's probably going to drop a couple of decisions here and there. And yet, he's going to probably be remembered as more loved. And as a fighter, we have a better gauge of in terms of just how good he really was.